Rick, give us a little background on yourself, the bio, if you will, regarding you and your practice in Denton.
Well, I grew up in Argyle, Texas, which is a small community in Denton County. We grew up, raised horses on the side, and growing up, I never wanted to do anything but be a cowboy, but to raise horses, ride them, and my father was big on education. My father said if I wanted to be involved with horses, I needed to be a veterinarian. So I wound up working for a horse doctor for a while and started college with an eye towards being a vet. And wasn't very good at organic chemistry. And during that time, we were going to a bunch of rodeos. Went to a rodeo in Bay City, Texas, and I met a man named Rusty Duncan there. And when I had finished my ride on my horse, the gentleman came up and handed me a note and said a man wanted to talk to me. At that time, I thought it was going to be a newspaper reporter. I felt like somehow I'd been noticed and be on the front page of the sports section. Instead, it was Rusty Duncan. He was running for the Court of Criminal Appeals, and he was from Denton, living in Argyle, and seeing that I was from Argyle, so he came up to me. And I remember he asked me if I was a good young Democrat. And I told him, no, sir, I wasn't. He asked me to vote for him, and he told me what he did. And I had all the questions that people have about how can you defend someone you know who's guilty? How can you defend someone who kills people? And from that moment on, I decided that might be something I was interested in. And in school, I changed my major, and when I got accepted to law school, I immediately found a passion for criminal law. From the old cases to the procedural aspects of it. And I remembered I'd met this judge, and so I wrote him a letter and asked if I could work for him, and he told me I was hired. And so I worked a summer in law school in the Court of Criminal Appeals, and he told me I had a job when I got out of school if I wanted it. And I remember thinking he must have recognized my legal talents and how smart I was. And so I remember Rusty one time was explaining why he hired me. And I thought he was going to go into this discourse about my ability to recognize issues and how well I wrote. Instead, he said he hired me for 2 reasons. That's because I could drink beer and chew tobacco at the same time.
So Rusty Duncan had a profound effect upon you and your career choice.
Oh, absolutely. And from the time I worked on the court, my passion for criminal law developed, and I knew I'd made the right decision. But Rusty Duncan's the reason I became a criminal defense lawyer.
Denton County is a relatively small county compared to the other metropolitan areas. What is it like to practice law in a mid-sized, if you will, a small county population-wise, and going to the courthouse on a regular basis and that type of interaction? How do you feel about that, and how has it affected you as far as your relationships with clients in their cases?
Well, I've grown up in Denton County all my life. Where I am, we've got 2 colleges there, and so we represent a number of young people, and I can't tell you how rewarding it is to take a young person who's in serious trouble and put them in a position where they can go on and have a life and have a career and have a family. And that's probably the most rewarding thing to me is helping people, because that's so much of what we do. Because when they come in our office, sometimes it's the worst thing they've ever gone through in their life. And just to get them through it and have success, it's very satisfying.
Good. I know, Rick, you've traveled all over the state defending citizens accused of crimes, and can you relate some of the more memorable cases you've had and those experiences?
I'll tell you, one of the most rewarding cases I ever had was a young man named Mark Hannah Moore. Mark Hannamore had been to prison 5 or 6 times. His family didn't have any money. I mean, they were broke. His mother was dying of cancer. His father had diabetes, had both feet amputated. But Mr. Jackson, my partner, he just took care of it. Didn't matter.
And that's Hal Jackson. And I know, Rick, that he obviously was a big influence in your life. And there's a memorial each year, a seminar in his honor that you're instrumental in working with and putting on. Was his influence on you similar to Rusty Duncan's influence? Or?
Oh, there's no doubt. You know, one of the things I learned from Mr. Jackson was you take care of folks. You know, that's so much of what we do. And in the Mark Hannamore case, he was charged with 2 first-degree felonies, and they had a habitual offender paragraph, so he's looking at 25 to life. And the first case was a drug case, a hand-to-hand delivery case, and we didn't have a defense. And I remember going to the prosecutor, and we're trying to get a plea bargain in that case. And all we wanted was the minimum 25 years. And if you think about that, 25 years of a man's life is a lot.
Right.
And they were at 50. They wouldn't come down 50. And so I told him the story about his mother and his father. And I'll never forget. And I told him we're not making any money. We're doing this for free. And I remember that prosecutor told me, he said, well, Rick, that's all the more reason for you to convince him to take 50. And I want to tell you that he said it set me on fire. He said that, you know. So we tried the first case, you know, we got life. And we had a legal issue in that case involving jury separation. I think Hal Jackson could get any case reversed at any time if he wanted to. And that issue presented itself in this trial, and so we appealed it. While it was on appeal, the second case came up. The second case was aggravated assault on a peace officer. And I'll never forget our defense in this case because it was so unconventional. Mark was known for being violent, and he would fight at the drop of a hat. He did not like police officers. Mark's story in this case was he was driving down the road and the police officer recognized him and pulled him over and walked up and just started macing him with pepper spray. And Mark fought back, and I believed Mark's story. So in our opening statement, it was real short. We said to the jury, we said, there's something about Mark Hannamore that makes him different from any man you're ever going to meet. And we stopped and we sat down. And so when the first officer was on the stand, rather than hide his criminal history, we exposed it.
Okay.
And we exposed every arrest that he'd ever had, and we asked this officer, you knew who Mark Hannamore was before you pulled him over. You knew his reputation in the law enforcement community. You knew he'd been to prison before. And then we just started rattling off every arrest that he had. He'd had fights with police officers before, and we got this officer talking about it. And then we asked him a question, have you ever been in a fight with Mark Hannamore? And his answer was yes. And we asked him to produce the report the next day, and it turns out he was wrong. And so he'd effectively lied on the stand, but we had him rolling. And so the prosecutor in that case knew he was in trouble, and he made us an offer of 15 years.
Wow, good. And
we said, we'll take that contingent upon this pending appeal. If we win this appeal, he's got to get 15 on that too.
Okay.
And sure enough, we won the appeal, and what started out as a 50-year sentence went down to 15. And we went through two trials and one appeal for nothing.
Gosh.
For no legal fees. And it's cases like that that are more memorable to me sometimes than an acquittal.
Right.
But that's one that I'll never forget.
One thing that impresses me, Rick, about you and your practice is how much you do invest in your clients and put forth an effort, and not only being there but physically but emotionally with the clients. Does that play a role as far as how effective you've been in your practice in the past and currently?
I think no doubt, because when you've helped somebody, Mike, who's come in and had a drug or alcohol issue, the community knows that you come to see us, and not only are you going to get a good defense, but you're going to get some life lessons and some direction from our office. And every client that comes in has the potential for a drug or alcohol issue, and we tell people there's two parts to a criminal case, and the first part you can't do anything about. Are you guilty or not guilty? Because those facts are historical. But the second part of a criminal case, what's going to happen to you, those facts are not historical. They can change every day, and they will if you'll do something. And so putting people in positions where they can get help, get better, I can't tell you how rewarding that is to see lives changed because of the direction you sent a person.
You spoke earlier of representing young people, college students in your community. Obviously that has a big impact on them and the direction they take in the future and what the future holds for them. You mentioned being rewarded by doing and undertaking such an effort and task. Do you recall any memorable cases with regard to any students and how that may have changed them and turned their lives around as a result of your assistance?
Every college kid that comes in that has a drug or alcohol issue, we talk about turning a negative into a positive. We get them to thinking about what's your life going to be like 5 years from now or 6 years from now when you get out of school and you're having to address this case with their prospective employer. What are you going to say about it? How did you respond to it? And you put those people in a position of overcoming adversity, and it winds up being a character strength or attribute that they can sell and they can market. And, oh, it's so rewarding to have somebody come back and say, man, I've got this job and thank you, it came up and this is how I responded, and how impressed they were with my answer and what I've done. So it's stories like that that make you feel good about helping folks.
Rick, you as president of TCDLA, past president, helped to shepherd the organization through some tough economic times and issues regarding building and personnel. Can you tell us about that and how that experience has helped to shape you and shape the organization as well?
I think one of the things that I felt was lacking in this organization was the involvement of membership. Because when I took over, it seemed like everything revolved around the president, and the officer chain. Because at that time we had president's retreats, parties,
receptions, and
parties. Everything revolved around the president, and so we changed all that to membership retreats, membership trips, membership parties, and I think it brought the association back together. And at the time I took it over, there was almost an incestuous relationship between TCDLA and the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Educational Institute, and we completely restructured that and made those two groups separate entities to avoid any type of conflict of interest. But it seemed when TCDLEI was making a decision about how to help TCDLA, how to distribute their funds, the board members of LEI would look and say, I'm going to give money to TCDLA, and they'd look in the mirror and saying, that's me. And so the conflict was apparent, and that's been addressed, and I think it's made this association stronger.
Under your tutelage as president, obviously membership did grow, and the camaraderie, if you will, also increased, in my opinion. What do you see at the future of TCDL? What does the future hold for our organization?
I tell you, right now, I do have a concern about where we are. You know, for first time in probably 20 years, we had a contested election for president-elect.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that was disheartening to me. I'm afraid of factions developing right now. But I also see this situation bringing us together, bringing the membership together to recognize that maybe we do have some issues that we need to address and how we can do better. But I'm seeing at the grassroots level members being interested in the association, wanting to participate and looking for ways to do that, and that's going to make us stronger.
Good. Let's go back to your practice and some of your cases. Rick, you mentioned earlier you were a cowboy. I take it you still do some cowboy activities?
Yes, sir.
And can you explain what those are? And I know you have two young, beautiful children who are involved as well.
It's funny, being around horses, being around cowboys, I think it shaped my life in so many ways. Just what I learned growing up, being around those people, the most honest, simple, pure folks in the world, don't want or need for anything. And that's something with my children that I've tried to instill. Some of the greatest times in my life, the greatest memories I have involve my son and my daughter, and being at the bar,
Yeah.
spending time with them.
I'm a country boy myself, I'm not a cowboy as you are, Rick, but you know, sometimes I often think about that in developing the case. It's like cultivating crops on a farm or helping the animals to grow. You take your time and develop that relationship with the land or with the animals. And somehow try to translate that into my clientele and practice and relationships. Do you see it in a similar way, and did you think that's helped you in your success as an attorney?
You know, I do. I think the relationship with your client is so important. And I think the way that people interview clients, by and large, is wrong. When you have a prospective client walk in your office, I think the worst thing you can do is hand them a sheet of paper and have them put in writing what their story is. That's not the way we communicate. So at my office, start just like you would with the horse. You start slow. They walk in and the first question they're asked is where they're from. We start talking about their family, where they grew up, and it's 20, 30 minutes into the conversation before we're talking about the case. And it opens people up. It gives them an easy way to communicate. And you know, once you've got the basic facts down, then I go into football mode. And I think so much of what we do as lawyers, criminal defense lawyers, you know, we're the head coach and the client's the owner, and we're making fourth and goal decisions in their case sometimes on a daily basis, where we've got one call to make, and as long as we've thought it out and know what could happen with each call, we make it and we live with it. But it helps me to think like a football coach when I'm in trial, when I'm dealing with the client. It gives me a level of confidence and a way of thinking that I think makes me effective in the courtroom.
Your practice runs the gamut from representing people accused of DWIs all the way to murder, capital murder cases and the like. Do you have a preference? Is there any particular type of case you enjoy handling, or does it just depend?
You know, it depends on the client, the facts. The first rule of law is every case is different. We had a case last year. It was an airline pilot. He was accused of assaulting a young child. And it's a very close family. He was married with 2 children, and the fear in that man when he walked in the office, knowing that he could lose his career, his family, go to prison for life, and how close we got. It was like they were a part of my family. His children were my children's age. To see the emotions and the turmoil he went through, thinking he could lose his children forever and never see them again. I tell you, that hits you right in the heart. We tried that case and we got 2 not guilties. His son testified for him. His daughter testified for him.
Wow.
That family's together. So
Right.
that was rewarding.
Yeah. Over the years of practice, I know I've experienced the change in technology and how it affects our presentations in cases. Have you seen that as well, and have you incorporated that into your practice as well?
I'm a big believer in technology in the courtroom. And, when PowerPoint came out, and, laptop computers, projectors, was two schools of thought. One school was that it was too slick, it was too fancy. My response to that was going back to the football analogies. Back in the 50s, all the coaches won games by keeping the ball on the ground, keeping it simple, and when the passing game started to develop, those coaches said, if you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 are bad.
Right.
And now the passing game dominates the game of football. If you can't throw the ball, you can't win. And I think technology is exactly the same scenario. If you don't use technology, you won't win, because your audience, your jurors, are used to seeing it in the classroom, the boardroom, churches, in every segment of their life. They're used to learning through technology. And so we have to incorporate technology as lawyers in a simple, effective way to communicate. And done properly, I think it's the most effective way to try a case.
Well, this is about Denton County, Rick. Rusty Duncan, Hal Jackson, Alan Levy, a good friend of mine as well, Rick Hagen, good lawyers coming out of this relatively small county compared to others. Do you attribute that mentorship, if you will, or relationship or camaraderie within the small county to helping your practice develop?
I do, and you look at, going back to football, you look at Tom Landry. You look at the Dan Reeves that came out of his system. You look at all the other coaches. Gene Stallings, head coach at Texas A&M, they were all mentored by Tom Landry. And I think the lawyers that come out of Denton County have one thing in common, that's the Hal Jackson influence. Right. And it's that type of influence that's passed down from generation to generation, and how you treat people and how you try a case, and how walking in the courtroom, there's no stranger, there's no man better than another. And from the security guard to the janitor, you walk up to them, you shake their hand, and you treat them with as much respect as any judge wearing a robe, because they deserve it. And so I think it's that type of mentality that has caused a number of lawyers to come from Denton County to go on and do some very successful things.
Well, we're about to wrap this up. You had the football analogy that you used. How about those Sooners this year?
We went and watched the spring game this year, and Oklahoma's going to do very well.
Good. You told us choosing criminal law as a profession was a result of the influence and impact of Rusty Duncan, as Hal Jackson as well. What do you foresee as the future of the criminal law practitioner in Texas? Is it something we have to overcome a lot of obstacles and stereotypes of lawyers in general and criminal lawyers in particular? How do we change that mindset, if you will, or can that be changed?
I think society views a criminal defense lawyer as probably the lowest level lawyer on the totem pole. Because I think when you walk in a courtroom to try a case, a jury looks at the prosecutor as the good guy, the judge is the smartest one in the courtroom, and looks at us as the person who's job is to get that guy off, and by the way, what they do. And so I think through credibility in the courtroom, letting people know that the Constitution has meaning. I think one of the best things that's happened to our profession, believe it or not, are the number of innocent people that have gotten convicted and have been exonerated. Because I think that has caused society to look at the current system, look at their mentality, look at the way they view the Constitution, and know, hey, we've got to look at it a different way, because if we don't, these types of mistakes can happen.
Do you foresee either one of your children going into the law profession?
You know, I sure hope. I think both my children would be tremendous lawyers. My daughter is so smart. My son's so credible. Both of them are straight A students. My son walks in a room and he commands respect. My daughter is so smart, so witty. You know, I think she knows more law right now than any of the lawyers out there in the seminar. You know, but I've gone over cases with my daughter since she was probably 8 or 9 years old. We'd be going down the road to rodeos, and she'd say, "Daddy, tell me about a case. Tell me about a case." And so I'd tell her. She'd come up with theories and angles and tell me who's guilty, who's not guilty. So
great.
We had a lot of fun.
Great. Rick, thanks a lot. Thank you for your leadership as our president, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, my friend.